Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're having a fantastic day so far. So a new bill released this year would require Social Security to increase payments for all beneficiaries by an even larger amount every single year moving forward. So we're going to be going over that bill. Plus, we're also going to be going over some new updates on the whole government funding fiasco. Will they avoid a government shutdown? And potentially, could we end up with Mike Johnson also being ousted from his speakership role, much like Kevin McCarthy was? But before we go ahead and dive into the main content of today's video, if you wouldn't mind helping me out real quickly by just giving this video a like, that just helps out with the good old YouTube algorithm, and also consider subscribing to my channel if you have not already. Okay, so to lead things off for today's video, of course, we have some new updates on the government funding situation. Of course, they have until the end of this week on Friday to fund the government in order to avoid a government shutdown. And it looks like Mike Johnson is trying to work out a plan where he might actually need some type of Democratic support, considering that some people in his Republican Party are also not going along with what his plan is. And if whatever he comes up with, if the Democrats agree with it, then he, just like Kevin McCarthy, may also potentially be ousted from his speakership role. So, according to The Hill, House Republican leaders are moving to pass a two-step stopgap government funding bill under a fast-track process that will require support from Democrats in an attempt to work around GOP opposition that threatened to tank the bill on a procedural vote. It is one of the first major decisions of Speaker Mike Johnson's tenure, and the same move that helped trigger a motion to oust former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. It is also sure to enrage the Republican conference's right flank. Such a move avoids a procedural rule vote teeing up the bill, which typically passes as a party line vote and serves as a test of party unity, regardless of whether members of the minority party vote for the underlying legislation. But some Republicans had threatened to vote against the rule out of frustration that the bill did not include spending cuts or key conservative policy reforms, which would have prevented a vote on a final passage of the legislation. In the House GOP's slim majority, GOP leaders can afford to lose just 3 Republican votes on any party line measure, assuming full attendance. Far more than that have signaled opposition to the CR. Under the continuing resolution, part of government funding would run out on January 19th, with the rest running out on February 2nd. Johnson has argued that the two-step plan is the best way to avert a massive omnibus funding package pushed by the Senate and allows Congress more time to negotiate on fiscal year 2024 funding. On the other side of the aisle, Democratic leaders have not yet said whether they will support the bill, but have given signals that they could. So once again, they are going to probably need Democratic support in order to pass this bill through the House, and this is the exact same move, once again, that Kevin McCarthy made. And whenever Kevin McCarthy did it, they voted to vacate him from his speakership role. Will they do the same to Mike Johnson? Will Mike Johnson also be vacated? Well, we've seen it once. That was the first time in history. So I really wouldn't be surprised if we see it again, and then it might take another month to vote in a new speaker. So just crazy things going on in Washington this year. Now, of course, as another government shutdown looms, a lot of Social Security beneficiaries and VA beneficiaries are wondering whether or not that's going to impact their benefits if we do have a government shutdown. And thankfully, it will not impact the benefits. They will continue to go out on a normal, timely basis. So once again, according to The Hill here, it does say that Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security are funded through separate processes, unlike other programs that require renewal. So these payments will not be impacted. And of course, over in the Senate, we had the Senate Minority Leader and Mitch McConnell backing the Speaker's spending proposal, despite the lack of Ukraine money. We do not have money going to Ukraine, nor do we have money going to Israel in this government funding bill. So let me know in the comment section below, do you think that we should be funding these wars? Are you in favor of giving more money to Ukraine? Are you in favor of giving more money to Israel? Or do you think we should fund both wars? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Now, of course, in some other news, according to the Senior Citizens League, there's 80% of retirees want better inflation protection. Quite frankly, I'm surprised that number isn't even higher because the cost of living adjustments that we've been receiving over the past several years, while they have been decent, like this year was 8.7%, next year is going to be 3.2%. While that is certainly decent, I would say that inflation has actually been a lot higher than 8.7 and 3.2% over the last couple of years. And if, certainly we would take higher increases if we could, but we're not receiving higher increases. So once again, according to the Senior Citizens League, the 3.2% Social Security cost of living adjustment is well above the 2.6% average over the past 2 decades. Still, according to a new survey by the Senior Citizens League, 80% of retirees think Congress should beef up inflation protection by providing a COLA that more closely reflects inflation experienced by older adults. Some senior advocates, including the Senior Citizens League, have proposed using a, quote, senior CPI to determine the annual COLA. Quote, if that were the law today, the COLA in 2024 would be almost a percentage point higher, 4% versus 3.2%, just announced by the Social Security Administration, says Mary Johnson. Johnson bases that estimate on the rate of increase in the Consumer Price Index for the elderly, most recent data that was released yesterday. So right now they use what's called the CPIW, which is the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. And a lot of lawmakers, however, are advocating that we switch that method over to the CPIE, which is the Consumer Price Index for the elderly. In most years, the CPIE is actually higher than the CPIW is. So if we switched over to the CPIE, in most years it would be higher. However, in certain years, the CPIW actually happens to be higher. So some lawmakers are even advocating that we look at both numbers, both the CPIW as well as the CPIE, and whichever number happens to be higher, we should end up using that number. Now, there is a new bill that was introduced, just like I mentioned earlier on in today's video, that would actually increase benefits every single year for Social Security beneficiaries, and that is by John Garamendi. So we can see here that John Garamendi is reintroducing the Fair COLA for Seniors Act, and once again, that was this year. And we can look at this chart up on the screen. It's pretty interesting. It's asking the question, how much more would Social Security recipients receive if paid the higher of the CPIW or CPIE? So if they had to choose from either the CPIW or the CPIE every single year, moving forward, whichever happened to be higher, we can see this year they would actually end up receiving a 4% increase rather than 3.2%. That's because they would be using the CPIE, which ended up being higher this year in 2023. So instead of receiving a monthly benefit increase of up to $1,720 on average, it actually would have been bumped up to $1,753 this year. So if they did it that way, the increase would be around $33 higher on average for Social Security retirees. Of course, last year it would have been the same at 8.7%. And in most years, it actually would have been quite a bit higher. So over the years, things would have compounded much better. And over the years, Social Security beneficiaries, whether you're receiving retirement, SSI, or SSDI, you would be receiving much higher benefits if they went with whatever the higher COLA ended up being. Now, this is a no-brainer in my opinion, but it just comes down to whether or not they'll actually pass these rules that actually benefit Americans and make sure that we're able to keep up with inflation. And over the past couple of years, once again, inflation has just really run out of control. You can hardly fill up your grocery cart without going over budget. So hopefully they pass these rules and make it easier on Americans, make it easier on Social Security beneficiaries. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Are you in favor of this rule, or perhaps do you have an even better idea than what they are currently implementing? But that's all the news that we have for today's video. I certainly hope that you enjoyed and found value out of it. If you did, again, I would greatly appreciate if you could give this video a like. Consider subscribing to my channel if you have not already, and I will see you in the next video.